They say some people don't die. They just disappear into the silence they tried to expose. Dangelo was one of them. A man who sang about heaven, but lived through hell. When the news said he died of cancer, most people mourned the voice. But those of us who knew better mourned the warning. Because before he died, he called someone. Not a label, not a lawyer. He called me. And what he told me that night wasn't a story. It was a transfer. Because when someone gives you their truth, the next question is, how much of your soul are you willing to give in return? They told me it would be off the record. No contracts, no cameras, no phones, just a voice. That was the only instruction that stuck with me. He wants you to hear his voice. That's all they gave me, an address, somewhere north of Asheville, up in the mountains where cell towers don't bother to go. I wasn't given a time, just after dusk. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask who else had been called. Some part of me already knew I was the only one. The last time I'd even written about Dangelo. I was a junior journalist buried in a forgotten R&B column. I remember the title, The Voice That Disappeared. But that was before the rumors, before Angie Stone's final interviews surfaced, before the people she warned us about started dying, slowly, quietly, without any clear reason. That column was supposed to be about talent and retreat, but what it became was a eulogy I didn't understand. And now, nearly 2 decades later, I was driving into the woods with a black leather recorder in my passenger seat and a knot in my stomach that wouldn't let go. It was a long, narrow road, pine trees clawing at the sky, the sun bleeding out behind the hills. I kept checking the address, even though I knew I was close. The paper had started to curl from the warmth of my palm. There was a smell in the air, like cedar and old vinyl, even with the windows up. By the time I saw the cabin, I had driven past it twice. There was no mailbox, no porch light, just a single wooden home tucked between trees that looked older than the state itself. But I knew I was in the right place because I heard music, not playing loudly, just humming, like someone had left a needle resting on a record groove. The kind of song that didn't need volume because it was already inside your body. The kind of music Dangelo hadn't made in years. I parked beneath a crooked tree and stared at the front door. There were no cars, no sound, just the warm vibration of something soft and unfinished. And then, just as I reached for the door handle, the knob turned. He opened it before I could knock. And I swear to you, he was glowing. Not in the way we romanticize the past, not a metaphor. I mean, he looked like something from a dream I didn't know I'd had. Skin rich and smooth, no beard, no weariness, no age. Eyes like they hadn't closed in decades. He looked younger than me, but older than the music. And he smiled, not with charm, with recognition. "Come on in," he said. His voice hadn't changed. Still velvet, still full of ache. The cabin wasn't what I expected. No incense, no grand setup. Just a small wooden table with 2 chairs, 1 microphone, 4 white candles placed at each corner of the room, and a reel-to-reel recorder waiting, already spinning slowly, though nothing played. There were no lights on inside, just the amber flicker of the candles and the last breath of daylight bleeding through the window. "Sit down," he said, "and before you ask, no, you're not crazy." I didn't respond. My pulse had started whispering behind my ears. It always did when something big was about to happen. I just didn't know what kind of big this was. I sat across from him. The air felt warmer than it should have, like the room remembered people, or maybe people remembered the room. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small matchbox, one of those old ones from hotels that don't exist anymore. He lit a fresh candle between us, placing it right beside the microphone. Then he looked at me. "You know," he said, "I never wanted to be seen." I blinked. I know that sounds like a lie, especially from someone like me. But everything they ever looked at, wasn't me. It was skin. It was shoulders. It was that video he smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. They loved my body, not my voice. And after a while, even I couldn't tell the difference. I should have said something, asked something, but I couldn't. The moment felt too wide, too heavy, too quiet, and he knew. They used to call it soul music, he said, tapping the mic with 2 fingers, but what they wanted wasn't soul. It was possession. He looked at me again, slower this time. They couldn't own the voice, so they tried to own the man. He leaned in. I didn't flinch. The candlelight made his face look like smoke. "I've got one story left," he said, "and I want to give it to you." He didn't press play. The recorder was already spinning. There was no button to hit, just a slow, mechanical hum, like something that had always been recording and only now decided to let us notice. "You ever feel like you've been awake too long?" he asked softly, eyes still on the flame. "Like sleep didn't forget you, it just moved on?" I said nothing. The room didn't ask for words, it just wanted breath. "They kept asking me to make another video like that," he said. "You know the one." He smiled, but only with his mouth. "Women were throwing underwear at the monitors. Men called me a genius, but the labels, they called me a product." He tapped the mic twice. A quiet thump echoed back, as if the table remembered the shape of every hand that had ever struck it. "That video wasn't for me," he continued. "It was for them. They filmed me like a body, edited me like a statue, marketed me like a bottle of something you're only allowed to drink in the dark." I watched his shoulders sink, not from shame, but from memory. It was the kind of weight people carry when they know exactly who dropped it on them. They wanted to touch me without touching me. "That's what TV lets them do," he said. "And when I wouldn't come to the parties, when I said no to the extras, they started calling me difficult." He looked up. For the first time, our eyes locked. There was no seduction in it, just gravity, like I was being pulled towards something I hadn't agreed to fall into. "You ever been invited to a freak-off?" he asked. I shook my head. "Good," he said, "because once you walk in, you don't get to walk out as yourself." He told me about the pressure that followed voodoo, the years that went quiet, the sudden rumors about weight gain and drugs, about him being off, being lost, being wasted. "But I was never the one wasted," he said. "They wasted what they couldn't own." He paused. "I got fat on purpose," he whispered. "Stopped cutting my hair. Got quiet. Played dumb. It was the only way I could disappear without dying." I didn't breathe for a moment. He wasn't talking to me anymore. Not just me. He was talking to whoever else might be listening. The recorder clicked softly like it agreed. "She tried to protect me," he said, voice thinner now. "Angie. She saw it coming." The room changed with that name, not physically, energetically, like the flame dipped lower just to hear it. "They lied on her," he said. "They said she introduced me to all the worst things, but it wasn't her. It was them." He didn't need to explain who them was. "They sent letters around the industry, called her unstable, said she was the reason I fell off. Had people mail those letters on purpose." Knowing they were lies, he pressed 2 fingers to his temple, then to the candle. "They tried to break her testimony." Silence settled in. "She told me once," he continued, "that the moment she started talking too loud, she started getting sick. Blood infections, financial blackouts, strange cars watching her hotel. You don't think those things are connected until you do." He looked back at the mic. "She said, if anything ever happened, don't believe the headline." And I didn't. Not for a second, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small strip of paper. Yellowed, torn at the edge, stained like it had been held too many times. On it, barely legible in smudged ink, "Truth is the light. But the light gets hunted." A gust of wind pressed against the cabin window. I hadn't even realized there was a breeze outside. The trees moaned like they'd heard all of this before. "I want to give you something," he said, eyes on the candle again. "But it ain't an interview." He reached over, and for a moment I thought he was going to take my hand. Instead, he placed something in front of the mic, a matchbook from a jazz club that had closed in 2003. "I only got one more story left in me," he said, "and I need someone who'll carry it without burning up." The flame flinched. So did I. "You're not here to listen," he said, as if correcting me. "You're here to receive." He didn't speak for a long time after that, just sat there, staring at the flame, as if something in it was singing, only to him. The matchbook still lay in front of the mic. His fingers hovered above it, not touching it, just close enough to feel its heat. I could hear the recorder hum beside us, still rolling, like it didn't need permission, like it had heard something sacred and was now guarding it. Then Dangelo leaned back in his chair. "I ever tell you what that cabin used to be?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "It was a church once, a small one, old wood, no steeple, just a cross and a choir. You can still hear the walls hum if you sit here long enough. That's why I came back. There's something here, something holy, even now." He reached to the floor beside him and lifted something from a velvet pouch, a worn vinyl record in a blank sleeve, no label, no title, just a faint circle of dust pressed into its skin. He stood up and crossed to the corner where a turntable rested beneath a window. As he placed the needle down, I felt something tighten in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The music that filled the cabin wasn't sharp or structured. It was texture, raw, grainy, like something that had been whispered to wax rather than sung. Bass that moved through the walls like a second heartbeat. A low hum of Rhodes keys, slightly off center. A man's voice layered low beneath the melody, not singing but breathing, murmuring. I felt it first in my palms, then in my spine, like the song wasn't playing in the air, but through me. "I made this the night I disappeared," he said, facing the window. "Never released it, never titled it, just pressed one copy and left it here. I wanted the room to have a memory of me, not the me they sold, the me that bled his voice dropped. You ever think about how sound travels? It never dies. It just gets quieter. Fades until only the walls remember." He turned slowly, the candlelight catching his profile. "That's why they want the music, not the artist, because music doesn't talk back." He walked back toward the table, eyes on me now. The music still played, but it had shifted, a sudden syncopation, not jazzy, just personal, as if it were watching us. He reached for the flame again, this time letting his thumb glide across the tip. Not enough to burn, just to test its shape. Then he asked, "Do you want to feel it?" I should have said no. Every logical part of me screamed it. This was crossing a line, not ethical, not legal, spiritual. But something in me had already crossed. I nodded. He sat again, folded his hands, stared through me. "Close your eyes," he said. And I did. I heard him take a long breath, then a whisper. "I wrote Brown Sugar on a night I was trying to remember what real felt like," he said. His voice curled around the room like smoke. But by the time it hit the radio, they'd already taken it from me. Dressed it up, re-recorded the vocals, flattened it into something marketable. His whisper grew closer. But the version I kept, the real one, it's still in the walls. That's why you feel like this right now. My skin flushed. I felt the music press against the base of my neck, sliding down over my shoulders like a warm, invisible hand. It wasn't touch, exactly. It was recognition, as if some part of him that no longer lived in his body was reaching for me through the keys, the bass, the breath between lines. I didn't know if I wanted to cry or scream or dissolve entirely. Instead, I whispered, "What is this?" He answered, but not aloud. In my mind, I heard, freedom. Just for a second. Before the light finds you, I open my eyes. The room looked the same, but he didn't. His expression was still, but his skin shimmered. Not glowing now, but flickering, like candlelight caught in muscle and memory. Like he was vibrating between who he was and who he used to be. His voice was still warm, but it had weight now. I've been hiding in the music for years, he said. It's the only place they couldn't follow. Then he reached for the recorder and touched it gently. I'm not giving you a story. I'm giving you what's left. He stood again. This time, he held out his hand. Dance with me. The words landed heavy. I knew I shouldn't. This wasn't an interview. This was something else entirely. A crossing of wires, truth and touch, spirit and body. But my legs moved before I could stop them. I stood, and I took his hand. We didn't dance like lovers. We danced like ghosts. Slow, barely moving, swaying between two worlds. His breath in my ear, the vinyl crackling in the background, the candlelight rising and falling with every step. It felt like love, but it was deeper than that. It was communion. Somewhere in the music, I stopped being myself. I became part of the song, a note, a vibration, a memory. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt free. Terrified, but free. His hand slid to the small of my back, gentle, steady, certain. We swayed slower now, like the room had thickened with sound. The candlelight stretched in long streaks across the cabin floor, melting into the bass line, still pulsing through the vinyl. Somewhere in the background I could hear his breath, or maybe it was mine, a rhythm layered just beneath the music. He pulled me in tighter. Does this feel? He asked. The question landed like an echo, not a test, not a tease, a plea. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat burned, my chest tightened. There were no words that would have made sense inside that kind of beauty. He placed his forehead gently against mine. The static from the record filled the space between our bodies. I could feel his heartbeat through his shirt. It was fading, but not weak, just finishing. When they remember me, he whispered, they'll play the music. They'll play that video. They'll write essays and make documentaries and try to pin me down. His hand slid away from my back and rose to cup the side of my face. But don't remember me in pictures. Remember me here, in this vibration, in this light. The vinyl began to slow. A faint distortion rose up through the air, not harsh, not jarring, just a gentle unraveling, as if the music itself were releasing something it had been holding for too long. I don't have much left, he said, and what I do, I want to leave it with you. I blinked. The moment cracked, just slightly, lay like a glass held too tight, and in that split second, the illusion fell away. He was still holding me, still standing, but everything about him had changed. The man in front of me was not the glowing figure who opened the door. He wasn't smooth-skinned or timeless. He wasn't dressed in vintage silk. He was dying. His body was thin, bones sharp beneath his clothes. A tube of oxygen hung beneath his nose, barely delivering enough breath to keep him upright. His lips were dry. His eyes, still kind, were rimmed with gray. His skin had the pale, uneven tone of someone who hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. His voice came again, this time raw, rasped from somewhere deeper. I asked you to feel it, he said, and you did. He smiled weakly. That means you can carry it now. Then, quietly, almost too softly to hear, he said, I'm tired. I'm going to lay down. He turned and walked down the short hallway behind the mic stand, disappearing behind a half-open door. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5, but he never came back. I didn't knock. I didn't peek inside. I just stood there, surrounded by flickering candles and a mic still glowing red, feeling like I had just been handed something I wasn't supposed to touch. Eventually, I turned off the recorder. Or maybe it turned itself off. I'm not sure anymore. I took my coat, left the mic on the table, and walked out into the fading dark. The trees were still, the road empty. I drove the first mile in silence, windows cracked. The air was colder than I remembered, but I wasn't ready to think yet. Not until I reached the second bend down the mountain. That's when I saw it, a small black cassette sitting in my passenger seat. It hadn't been there when I drove in. It wasn't mine. No label, no case. Just a single handwritten word scratched into the plastic in faded silver ink. Feel. I pulled over, turned the engine off, stared at it like it might speak. It didn't. But something inside me started to hum, low, warm, terrifying. Like a vibration only I could hear. Like the first note of a song that would never stop playing. I didn't listen to it that night. I couldn't. But I knew what was on it. It was him. The last of him. And somehow, he had given it to me. When people ask me what happened, I don't tell them the truth. Not the full version. I say it was just an interview. A rare, private conversation with an artist who didn't do press anymore. They nod, they smile, they ask what he was like. I tell them he was music, and then I walk away. Because what he gave me that night can't be streamed, can't be written, can't be spoken. It can only be felt. And if you're feeling something right now, and even if you don't know why, then maybe he gave it to you too.